Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 567, written by Princess Rave 24, The Fog of Time. I was in the town next to my own, visiting my best friend as I typically do about 5 times a week. The commute from her house to mine is about 25 minutes, give or take, especially quicker in the evening since traffic is minimal. I know this stretch of road better than any other place on earth. This evening, I set out to go home when my best friend's husband called her. We exchanged goodbyes as her phone rang and I went off. I was driving along when suddenly an unexpected dense fog appeared. As I pushed through the fog, a small car slammed on their brakes. In turn, I slammed on mine. The car in front crept along slowly, so I decided to pass them. I pulled in front of the vehicle and was relieved to see the patch of fog clear up just a few minutes after it had started. However, I looked in my rear view and the car I went around was no longer behind me, which I thought was concerning, since we were traveling on a mountain highway, giving them no chance to turn off. But things only got stranger from there. As I continued on, I passed by a landmark I'm certain that I had driven past prior to the fog setting in. At first, I played it off thinking I was getting tired, or my mind was playing tricks on me due to the stress of the unexpected stop. But then I looked at the clock. 20 minutes had passed since I had left my friend's house, and I was nowhere near home. Could I have looked at the time wrong? I drove for a couple minutes in deep thought when I remembered the phone call my friend received. She could help me sort this out. I called her to see if she could tell me what time I had left, and she confirmed that the time I had been traveling was correct. I had been driving for 30 minutes at this time, and I was still about 10 minutes from home. Ever since, I've been trying to think of some sort of explanation, but I've got nothing other than it has to be a glitch in the Matrix. Anyone else have theories? Case notes, file number 567. This gives me the Mist vibes. Yep. No freaky spiders with acid webs. That's good. Still most concerning. One notable part is that you were able to get a connection to your friend via cell phone after. So you weren't taken out into a pocket of dead zone unless this fog represented the transition phase and after you left it, effectively you returned to your normal state. It would also explain the relative time loss and position change. I always want to say aliens when time distortions are involved, but the fog leads me away from that. No, I think this was some sort of vortex or portal. As I understand it scientifically, they shouldn't be possible, and yet this isn't the first story that appears to contradict that fact. It also shows that whatever these portals are, they're more than just a zip from one place to another through space-time. There are other people there living normal lives, just driving along. And why did the person driving suddenly brake when you saw him through the fog? Maybe, my theory, is he witnessed you in his rearview mirror materializing from thin air. That would freak anyone out. And I would definitely brake to see what the hell's going on. Case file number 568, written by TwoBrattyCats, the creepiest drive of my life. This happened to me about 2 years ago. Some friends and I were driving up to a spot that we visit often. It's literally one highway the entire way because it cuts through mountains. It's the only way to get there, the only road. You can't mistakenly go on another road. Anyway, the drive is about 2.5 hours. We've done this drive almost a dozen times. We had the GPS going just to keep us aware of exactly where we were and how much time we had left, even though we didn't really need it for directions. I mean, it's one road straight through, it's hard to get lost. At some point, we noticed that the GPS hasn't given us updates in a long time, and that it's no longer working. Weird, but it's one of those older dash-mounted ones, so maybe it just finally crapped out. What was weird was, we went to check the time, and we hadn't yet reached a landmark we should have hit 30 minutes ago. We all laugh about how the driver needs to pick up the pace and think nothing of it, until another 30 minutes pass, and another. And suddenly, we're already confused. We keep driving and driving and driving, but it feels like we're getting nowhere, and we've now exceeded what should have been the total time for the entire trip. We're all looking at the time on our phones in disbelief. Remember, this drive is literally one road. It's the only road. There's no possible way to make a wrong turn. We're not passing any landmarks, just trees and rocks, and more trees and rocks. We kept the time on our phones for another couple of hours until everyone but the driver fell asleep. When we woke up, over 5 hours had passed. The driver remarked that he was tired and didn't remember much of the drive. Somehow, we drove for over 5 hours on what is a 2.5-hour drive, and that didn't seem to end until we fell asleep. We all have kind of a foggy memory of what we talked about during the ride and when we fell asleep. We also know not one of us saw the landmark we were waiting on, despite it being literally impossible to miss and something we always watch out for. It's literally part of the appeal of the trip. One of the weirdest experiences in my life, and I get this weird feeling that washes over me every time I think about it. Bonus file, written by TheOtherLadyDi, the life-saving ghost. This happened to me one day and I wanted to share. I was a college student and I was home for vacations, along with my parents and my 2 siblings. That makes us 5 people in the house. Of all of us, I'm the only one who's a night owl. I stay up really late and sleep in the morning. This one night, after I finished cleaning up and putting everything back in place, I went up to my room and started reading a book as usual. Sometime later, I heard knocking on my door. It was pretty late, but I thought it was one of my family members, so I said, "Come in," but no one came. I went and opened the door and didn't find anyone. Everything was calm and it seemed like everyone was asleep. I went back to my room. I had barely settled back in bed when I heard knocking again. It creeped me out. I opened the door again and no one was there. I wanted to shake the fear off, so I started checking the house, the hallway, the bathroom, etc. Then I went down to the first story and kept checking, and I heard a noise in the kitchen. I went to see what the noise was, but the kitchen was empty. Then I looked at the gas stove and realized it was on. I'd forgotten to turn it off. I turned it off and went back to my room. No more knocking on the door. Next morning, I asked everyone if they heard anything at night, and they all said no. What are the chances of me, the only person awake, to hear noises and be led all the way to the kitchen to turn off the stove I left on? Case file number 569, written by rhodyrooted, the yellow sunglasses. This happened 3 to 4 years back. I lived in a home for a year after college and decided to go for a run one morning. I live on a cul-de-sac in a rural area that has a trail surrounding the whole neighborhood, about a mile or so looping. It was warm, so I dressed appropriately, put on my headphones, and started my run. About halfway through, I rounded a corner of the trail with decent but not good visibility, and there was a man standing there that scared the crap out of me. In my perspective, he came out of nowhere. Embarrassed, I stopped my run and took out my headphones to catch my breath and say hello, given he had to be a neighbor because this isn't a marked or well-known trail at all. I noticed he was dressed strangely for the time of year, but didn't think much about it until after. He had on a bluish/purplish jacket, long pants, a beanie, and yellow sunglasses. He looked like a skier from a 70s or 80s movie, bearded. I told him how badly he startled me, and we both chuckled, and he asked me where I was from. I told him from this neighborhood and the street name. Again, it was a dead-end cul-de-sac. He asked me if they finally finished that development. I've lived on the street my entire life. It was completed over 20 years ago. I told him yes. We must be thinking of different ones because of this. He looked confused, and then I said goodbye and continued my run. I ran for no more than 20 feet before the eeriness of the conversation got the best of me, and I looked back, and he was completely gone. There's no way I can imagine that he'd have been able to move out of sight that quickly. The last details I want to add for this post are that I'm not superstitious, but this was eerie and still freaks me out to this day. I also, in telling the story to my family an hour after it happened, recalled in my telling that I didn't remember seeing any skin on him. To be clear, I'm not saying I observed a lack of skin. I just do not recall seeing any exposed skin anywhere on his face or otherwise. He was covered in clothing, from head to toe.